In this video, we'll look at the automation tab. This process allows me, the user, to bypass manually adding data to all of my sources and then loading the queries and finally pushing out those exports. We'll take a look at an example here within the restaurant demo project that loads 10 sources, 6 queries, and 3 exports every day at about 5 a.m. And you can see that by the auto run and then the labels up here at the top with details. Clicking into the latest batch load or automation that ran, you'll see 10 of my sources all successfully updated. They took a few seconds, and you can see it happen about 5 o'clock this morning, followed by the queries, and lastly, the exports. So this is built off of something called dependencies. So these sources power your queries, which then push out to exports. Within the queries, you'll see a couple of dependencies that exist. So my final query is actually dependent on this staging query to actually run, which is based off of these 10 sources. Also, this pacing export similarly is based on, or dependent, this pacing query that has to happen first. So within this automation tab, you'll see a nice sequence of sources that are loaded, followed by queries, and lastly, the exports. To do this, within the sources, you want to make sure that you have this setting checked to auto load, and then you choose your cadence of how often you want the load to happen. For me, I have it set to daily. You can also choose weekly or monthly. Similarly, if we go back into the queries, you also want to make sure that you have an option called Run Dependents selected. This allows, once you choose to run your query, this will create a separate batch load within automation to go ahead and run this query, followed by the next export or query that's dependent on this run. So looking at this through the exports, you'll see a nice log or history of when all of these happen. If I were to create a separate one, just like this, you'll see this is a separate run specifically that I created outside of this batch load. But again, similar to the automation tab, you have a log here of when all of these exports happened. The automation tab is key to allowing you, the user, to have data that's updated or refreshed every day, every week, or as often as needed without having to go into each of those sources or queries that you've built and running or loading those data.